my theme with this novel is very much about, right, like it's so interesting to look at the way that art can reflect these theories, these practices, and the fact that I truly believe like our next stage of human evolution is self-made. We have to evolve
Mm.
ourselves, right? Like I always reference like it's not going to Mars with Elon Musk. It's like the things that for thousands of years spiritual leaders have been like, hey, look over here.
Mm.
So I would very much love to talk about that. And yeah, likewise, Vyushti, I lit up. I'm super excited about yeah, what's overlapping here. And I think it's gonna be really, really juicy.
All right, I'm gonna put the finger on it. I already pressed record, so um, welcome, welcome everyone who's listening. Good to have you with us. I hope we can, use your time well, give you something with it, and well, also welcome Lydia and Vyushti. So good to have you. Like I said we already had a little chat, so we've had this on the back burner for long, and I think we can also say that we have all been really excited about coming together and seeing how our ideas, resonate and also empower and what's the overlap. And I think there's a lot. We already know there's a lot. So I wanted to put finger on the topic of soul and your novel. So Lydia just shared. I just learned about this that she's writing a novel. I'll put you there, out there, on the stage.
Um, um, I mean, I think the way I want to maybe beautifully deflect this question is insofar as talking about how powerful art is in this work. And so my novel is my thesis, and it is a beautiful tale of struggle in the times that we live, and also a reflection of what I believe and have found to be so true and interesting on this path, on the spiritual path, on um, the path of looking back, what has been forgotten, what needs to be remembered and integrated as we move forward as a species for collective thriving. And then, um, and what that looks like in someone's personal journey. Um,
Mm,
and in a love story, and in a love story of Eros and of um, an old consciousness and a new consciousness, masculine and feminine. Um, I love your face, Vyushti, and my womb is just singing as I describe this. It's so much fun to do, and as I continually work on it every day and play with it, I am just so reminded. For me, I'm curious if you both have this experience. Novels and literature, movies as well, stories mean and have meant so much to me as mirrors for
mm,
my own journey, and seeing parts of myself that I haven't seen and have been such a part of my work before I knew what the work was, if in my personal journey. So that is, in short, the intention. And I think one of the biggest takeaways as a philosopher by training, and in the field of psychology and consciousness, what does it look like to show someone the feeling of theory and ideas and data, but as it's lived, and what it actually looks like in our world to be applied and to impact society. So it's been so just juicy and fun and yeah, very liberating and joyful.
Wow. I am so glad that I was muted while you were talking because I was like, ooh, yes, wow, while you were speaking. Because, yes, absolutely. I think that everything you spoke on is so true. And I especially loved what you spoke, your story, firstly, phenomenal. I love the idea of like a love story with Eros and an old consciousness and what. I cannot wait to read it. But what you spoke on, especially at the end there with the feeling and the lived experience of
Mm.
theory, of, science, whatever it is, I think that is so, so important. And I think that that is at the edge of consciousness, because I think with the way things have been, it's become very rigid and it becomes very cyclical. And then we get caught in what it's supposed to be. And then we don't have room for exploration. We don't have room for play. We don't have room for, like you said, that lived experience. So, yeah, I completely agree. And I'm really curious to see how that opens up and how that plays out. And yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I totally like I'm resonating. I have, it's been a big part of my, growth through the storytelling, and I always wonder like what, like, having learned and still learning, like what is the story of humanity, and constantly, posing the question for myself and maybe for others too, like what could the story be of humanity? You can say that in one sense it's the science, the technology, the knowledge that has, enabled us to leap forward. But in another sense, it's equally the arts, the music, the plays and the, movies, the books, the stories we tell, the myth. And I've always been captured by myth and mythology. And sadly though, I've been maybe last almost 2 decades, let's say 15 years, I've been mostly invested in terms of books. I've been invested in uh, science and like explicit knowledge, although that also touching on mythology, anthropology, but yeah, I like my soul aches and misses for science fiction in a sense, and for like classical literature and these mediums, because the thing is that these symbols, these metaphors, these experiences, they they fit in themselves so much more than you can fit in like an explicit kind of whatever knowledge or statement or idea or model or theory. And there is, and of course, like Vyushti said, also the aliveness, the juice of life, the meaning of living, the experience of living, and how to convey these. And just to reflect my last kind of coming back to so these are vinyl players and kind of a like a DJ interface I'm building, like maybe a year ago. Yes, exactly a year ago. I woke up and I think I even had maybe even more than one time. I woke up from a dream, like basically in agony, in deep sadness, like really crying, physically feeling the deep sadness of like I miss music. I miss music. And lastly, like I or like just yesterday, I was thinking about, I'm building this project in the NPNs and the infrastructure and the brand and everything, and then I felt the same, like a similar theme, a lot less, but I miss colors. So I'm also in the process of reviving colors and then music back into my life, and like they teach so much about life and reality and ourselves, and just and this is kind of also like, first of all, I want to jump into the novel also, like on the topic of soul, because you mentioned it. But also, like I mentioned in our chat, that one thing I would be really interested to talk about with you is Tantra as a lived experience, or your lived experience of it, because that precisely is appealing to me as a philosophy or a way of life, precisely because of the juice of life and embracing of life, in comparison to most of like Western, really really dry and away from here type of religions and philosophies. And even talking about Renaissance, like disease, or the hippie revolution, or with Sagi we talked about, like the second Renaissance happening right now regarding psychedelics. Like, if you can, one way you can describe an LSD trip or acid trip is colors, or richness or intensity of reality. And anyways, I've already gone off a tangent, so maybe you want to hop on board.
I've been chomping at the bit this whole time, and I just see Vyushti, and I just see us both just lighting up. There's so much to it, and I so feel you, Remo. Like, I literally just the other week, as a Christmas solstice gift to myself, went secondhand shopping and bought, including this dress, a few. I was like, what colors don't I have? Which used to be a lot, and went through this whole process. It was deeply meaningful to me about reclaiming color as how I adorn myself. And I literally remember the moment in sixth grade. I went to a private school. We had to wear the exact same uniform in sixth grade. When we got to middle school, you could wear any solid color polo and pant. So you best believe sixth grade Lydia was like in the rainbow. And I used to do these epic monochrome outfits. And I think I was in one of my monochrome purple outfits. And this older girl came up to me and she's like, "Why do you always dress so colorfully?" And it broke my spirit. And it made me, and that from that moment on, it was like beiges, grays, whites, blacks, like what's the cool chic thing? And living in New York City now, especially in contrast to somewhere like London, where I feel like people are very colorful, they're very wacky in their style, and there's just a different vibe in London fashion. Everyone in New York wears black or beige or white, and no shame to it, but looking around and having it reflected to me, like where is the color? And when you talk about acid and you talk about color and you talk about symbols, it's like these colors are archetypes of information and hold an entire rich symbolism behind them. And there's the whole field of color magic and how do we use color in intention and ritual. And there's just so much richness and aliveness. And I feel like at the core of what you were sharing with music and this deep mourning of missing music in your life, missing soul, right? Like, that's where my soul comes in. It makes me think about in Dead Poets Society, when Robin Williams is like, law, medicine, these are noble pursuits, but poetry, art, music, beauty, romance, these are the things that we stay alive for. These are what make us human. And I have chills saying that because it's so true. And in a world that no longer values art for art's sake, but for commodification, this is the reckoning of the damage to the soul. The 15 years I've read books on science, the waking up from dreams as messengers of I miss music. And what does it look like? As we were talking before we started to record this, what does it look like to radically reclaim our creative birthright as humans and the things that make us human? And then when we bring Tantra into it, it becomes more nuanced to me in my embodiment of that entire that field as a practice of, but also how can I love science? How can I embrace those pillars that have also come at a cost? Because if I reject, I can't see the divinity in that, the divinity and the grace of Western medicine, for example. But I also have enough perspective to know it's where's the comprehension, where's the holisticness, where's the other half. And that's my intention in the novel, is to provide a mirror of who is the other half, where is the other half, what is the personal struggle as mirrored in relationship, but the relationship in the novel is the relationship also within ourselves. How we reject soul, how we cast that shadow out onto another person and we reject her or him or them or whomever. Entire ways of being and thinking. And it, I think it works both ways. And, to Vyushti's share in the beginning, it's the integration, the integral consciousness as we move forward and the nuance, what is beyond polarity. But first, what does it also mean to own and embody the poles within ourselves? Vyushti, I see you nodding. Go off, sister.
No, just nodding in resonance because 1,000%, like integration, nuance, these things are so present for me because I think so much of the paradigm that we're moving out of is based on polarity and duality, and there is so much value in that. But I think where we got skewed as a collective is that it became separation. It became either or. And I think that's where we get stuck in this projection that you were talking about, right? Or whatever it is. And I think in this integration, that's when there's the archetype of the divine child. The divine child is born out of the marriage of the duality, whatever the duality may be. And I think that's where we talk about music, we're talking about color, we're talking about aliveness, really being immersed in the richness of what life has to offer. And that doesn't mean that the child isn't going to fall down and get cut, but it's how you approach it, right? Like there is curiosity that why did I get cut? Like there's so much play with the whole journey as that divine child archetype. But like you said, Lydia, there has to be this sense of intimacy with those dualities. There has to be not this projection of the shadow, but how do we look at that? How do we see it? How do we see the value in that? It's not a demon to be cast aside, but it's something to be looked at with compassion so that it can be integrated. And we have to be able to look at our flaws. We have to be able to look at all of this, and only then can it happen in the collective. So just yes, I was completely nodding in resonance.
Yeah, this is exactly what why I'm interested in Tantra as well. I guess like you can oppose, like Western religions, which are much more about like focused on the individual, while and I guess this is what has, resulted in this Western society with its flaws and its glory as well. But I guess maybe also like, and I'm totally out of my like expertise here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can also bring yoga into this, which is to say that, in yoga and in Western like emphasis on the individual, we are to become like perfect in ourselves, kind of like a balancing these polarities 50-50 within us and becoming like this, this singular being, while in Tantra it's much more about like in the coming together of these polar opposites, in the coming together of man and woman, in the and the dance in between, the dynamics, the movement, the breath in between these things, and also of course, like you touched upon the shadows as well, how to play with these shadows, how to dance with these shadows, how to integrate these shadows instead of projecting them outwards or fighting or colluding.
I think you brought a lot up with that. And I firstly, even like with the individual aspect that you were talking about, like in the West, how it focuses so much on that. I think there is value in that too, right? Like in the Jungian class that Lydia and I took together, our professor spoke about how the West has like a top-down approach, whereas the East has a bottom-up approach. And it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just like they're two different ways of approaching divinity and the divinity within ourselves as well. So I don't think that there's one that's better or worse, but then how do we come together because of the way the world is, there is so much more connectivity. So now how can we both have a bottom up and a top down approach, like
Hmm.
why stick to one? Um, but yeah, with that, like I think with yoga and tantra and east and west, if we're talking about these things, I think there's also a lot of perspective that is skewed because Lydia, like you were talking about earlier about art and the commodification of that, I think there's a lot of commodification of these processes as well, which I think takes away from the integrity and the authenticity of the approach that's leading to it's not even about perfection or like a 50-50 balance between these dualities, but it's more about harmony, which can be like, 1 second my feminine is like taking lead, the next it's my masculine, and it's like how do they move with each other? And I think tantra is also a lot about that. It's this dance, but I'm gonna like throw it over to you, Lydia, to talk more about Tantra because of the work that you do.
Yeah, I think I love the weaving, no pun intended, that's happening between us. And um, 100%. When you were sharing about that inner dance, the dance that I think of is the dance between the lover and the beloved. How do I dance in this erotic relationship with spirit and with the divine or the universe or however you want to call it? How do I dance with that with my partner and honoring that my partner is that divinity? And this is one of the most, when we talk about sacred sexuality and sacred union, which is also like in the back of my mind is something that I want to touch on with the perfection. And if I flag it out loud, I will. Um, yeah, that enabling of that honoring takes place within and throughout. And to be able to have a framework for me that is that reminder um, and holds that sacredness so clear is such a beautiful way to be and to live. And I think that living harmony is exactly the piece. There's something I want to bring in here that I will also after I touch on the perfection. I think a really interesting piece about the Western myth and another intention I have in this novel is I was just watching Lord of the Rings last night, and in the beginning of it, it says like history becomes legend and legend becomes myth. And what it's like, that's so deeply, richly archetypal and collective unconscious. But what irks me about it is like, how dare we forget the reality of the myth? And that's where I mourn, Remo, is like the reality of the rich myths, especially as a Westerner, of my Western inheritance, of my indigenous once upon a time ancestors. What does it look like for me to reconnect with their myth, their story, their legend, their history? And so when we talk about perfection, this refinement of the self, right in the West, we can look at that also as the alchemical process, as the process of ascension, of resurrection. What does that mean as a psychological, archetypal process instead of something literal that happened, which goes back beyond the Christian myth. It goes into Egypt. It goes into like the crux of what history calls the dawn of civilization. And so this process of refinement is so beautiful. And Vyushti, when you speak about harmony, it reminds me of one thing I've talked so much about in my work and um, with my own experience and mystical experience, spiritual path is very much what does it look like to live and create a reality of heaven on earth? Well, that would require me to embody those principles, whatever I see that they may be. And what would that look like for me to wish that for the world? And how would I serve that? And then when we when we look at that, I think, you know, what I talk about in the Great Awakening and rising into all of our roles in the Great Awakening, however we look at that, what does it mean to be a soul that's chosen to come to Earth at this time? Why? What
Mm,
does it need to ask that question? What's happening? What's happening in the undercurrent, flashing back to the symposium, that's moving in the opposite direction of the surface of the water, of the surface of the
mm,
world? And so then we arrive at the Rainbow Warrior prophecy of the Hopi. What does it mean for a group of individuals across all races and cultures to rise up as the Rainbow Warriors, as those who will bring about unity, harmony, a new earth for the world? And what does that really mean and look like? What does it look like to feel into, is that what's happening now? And what might
mm.
I and my soul and my heart tell me about that journey? Um, yes.
Some some comments. First,
Please.
like some body reactions and some like energetic reflections. Like first of all, when you were in the beginning, when you were doing the intention setting, the little meditation, I had the image, or image is not correct. I would say like the experience of a heart beating, but not just like my heart, but maybe the collective heart, the heart of souls, or the heart of the earth, and like a drum beat, like a powerful drum, like a big, those Japanese taiko drums, or these you feel with your whole body, something like that. Then when you were like you were touching so many like archetypes right now, I had this image, or this vision of a whole of archetypes, and just kind of knocking, or touching with the staff on these stone statues or archetypes, and kind of evoking them back into life, or resurrecting them. I have this stone crumbling away and revealing the golden like glow underneath. It's Yeah, that's and of course a lot of shivers. So that's my embodied experience. But in terms of like the archetypes you touched upon, and I really want to jump into the soul. But the archetypes being the hero myth we have been kind of living, and one thing also, you talked about Lord of the Rings, histories written into epics and epics into mythology, but this is the linear development, but there's the circular development as well. Myth also recreating reality, and thus going through these processes cyclically to finally break free and transcend and ascend, or resurrect, as in the Jesus story. So bringing together these archetypes, we have been living the hero myth, and in our lives as well, we are living the hero myth, or the adventure is one like aspect of it, but the other, like, I think we are really now starting to step into the creator, or the builder, or the founder archetype or myth, the midwife, and that is such a journey, because you kind of have to let go, or you have to let the hero die, because the hero is the one who conquers, who slays, and who has some kind of a concrete goal or objective. But when you step into the midwife, you can slay that process, you can't conquer that process, you can only let go, you can you can pray. That's about as much as you can do. You can give in, you can let go, but you don't know what you are birthing, what is coming out of that. And of course, then again, there is an interplay between these things. What are we birthing? What are we founding? And how do we kind of healthily, embrace these archetypes, or have them, you know, integrate them, let's put it that way, then in individually and collectively. But I wanted to throw a curveball to you, and ask, like, what do you, first of all, feel free to comment, but also, what do you feel is the soul? You know, what are we and how do we embody the soul today?
Mm. Well, I just want to, I want to thank you for talking what I feel is the full reality as it relates to the hero myth and to consciousness today. And, for me, that word is surrender, right? Like what you were describing is how do I actively and empowered surrender and flow with the current of life and source and um, to trust that higher timeline, higher purpose, to find, to feel it, and to explore, to play, to discover, to reclaim parts of myself that haven't fit into this world or haven't fit into a concrete objective for my life and uh, my career. And I think that that is, and this is my work, that's the process I teach and really don't teach but enable midwife, um and I believe that's the work of our time. And so when it comes to, you know what is our soul, I mean, there's so many pieces that one could speak to, so many theories. And I think the most concrete and actionable idea, truth for me, is that, to quote Jim Carrey, I do not have a body. My soul is not contained, or my soul is not contained within the limits of my body. My body is contained within the limitlessness of my soul. I'm an energetic being that expresses and manifests in a quantum reality in and through my body. My body is being lit up as I say that. And what does it mean to honor that my soul, expanded consciousness, whatever we want to call it, contains the memory of all my lifetimes, contains experiences and knowledge, perhaps of my future lifetime, has all these connections to all the ancestors I've ever walked with, touched, been a part of. And what does it mean to live my life in connection and relationship to the empowering of my soul's purpose on earth? To honor, as I said, that my soul, if I feel it to be true in my body, that my soul chose to come to earth at this time for a reason. Why? And, in a really interesting process, in doing this work and being on obviously my own ever evolving journey, I have come to the peace that I am a discoverer of my soul because I do not remember. I do not remember all those lifetimes and all that knowledge. I do not remember the fullness of my purpose, but I have pings of excitement. I have pings of passion. I have pings of curiosity. And I trust that those lead me to it. And my work as little human Lydia is to do the excavating and the integrating and the healing in order to follow those. So that's what I think soul is in a Marlon Brando. Well,
I really dug the patriarchal face you did. My career.
thank you.
I really loved so many things that you said, but first, what you spoke when you were speaking on the surrender piece, jumping off of Remo's point, was you were talking about it as an active and empowered surrender. And I think that's such an important point because I think very often when people talk about surrender, it's almost like giving up, or just like going with the flow of the current, but kind of like on like a lazy boat, right? As opposed to like swimming with the currents or, dancing with the currents, where there's a little bit more of an active, like there's an active energy to surrender. And I think that that's one thing that you touched upon. And it also reminds me of like when you're talking about midwifing and birthing this new reality or birthing your creations, I see it more as also an artist, and it's related to that surrender piece because I'm seeing this artist and this massive canvas, but sort of just like flowing with the paints, the colors are coming to them, and it's surrendering to the inspiration, right? But that requires action as well, because otherwise you're just imagining the colors and the artwork without actually creating the artwork. So I think that's also talking about like that dance between dualities, like they both can coexist, and surrender isn't this passive journey, but something that's so active and so intentional, guided by the soul, like you were talking about. So I completely like love that you use those words when you spoke. And speaking about the soul, Rima, I'm really curious about your perspective on the soul because you brought it up a few times. So I am really, really curious to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, all these. Wait, I wanna finish another point, and then I'll come back to the soul. I love this topic on creation and creativity and being an artist. You know, one it's probably a quote somewhere, but one idea that came to me is that, you know, as an artist, at least the way I perceive it, or some intimations I've had, you know, the pieces that you create, these are just captures, moments of the music that you hear every day. You know, there are some beautiful movies about it. Like when I've had my kind of, let's call it, chakras open and really tapped into the source or the inspiration. You know, every time I close my eyes, I have these scapes and you know, I don't even have words for it right now. These let's say movies playing, but there are so many more dimensions to the images, to the experience than just, you know, vision or sight or colors or sounds. It's alive, and in that state of being, creating a piece feels like killing it. You know, you're just, you know, basically taking a snapshot of it, and of course, you know, the amount of skill you have, the amount of kind of definition you can put into that, I don't know, painting or piece, but really it's a state of being. It's a channel of perception, and you know, coming to live in that, I think that is the greatest, you know, one of the greatest or greater aspirations you can have in your life, as a human being. I think as a divine spark of Creator. You know, like, what was his name? I'm sorry, I'm butchering it, but anyways, one of the great artists of last century. He developed like a sight problem in his like later part of life, and then that's the story. That's how the story goes, anyways. Then an interviewer basically asked him, like, you know, you're a great artist, and we are having like you know, these amazing developments in technology and medicine. Like, you could actually fix your problem that you have right now, your sight problem, and imagine like you could do so much more, you know, then as an artist, and you know, give us these great gifts. And the artist said that, you know, I've basically toiled and prayed my whole life to come to this point where, you know, where the lines blur, you know, where these city lights turn into an aura, you know, basically like the northern lights, where I start to lose the sense of disconnection we have between people, between the objects. You know, I've given my whole life to come to this point. Why would I give it away now? So that's that's a few cents on creativity and creation. Probably had more to say, but don't remember. But in terms of soul, yeah. So my thesis was on soul, and basically all of the ideas that you said are contained within that. And it's the question of which framework do we want to take. I like to think of our souls and ourselves as baby gods, basically. But in a practical sense, one I've come to like in the last maybe few months is that our soul is our social, like in terms of this life, this embodiment, our soul is our socio-ecological niche. So basically our fitness, which we are finding throughout our lives, where we can, serve as well as grow, as well as feel at home. So definitely for me also the idea or intuition of home is really important. And my visions, in my visions, I have experienced that I've come to build a home here, to make this place a home, and it is not right now. It's pretty far from home. I mean, my personal home is all right, but with our extended perceptions, like on a global scale, it doesn't feel like home, with all the killing and pillaging and raping and murdering. So yeah, I would say there's something to say about the skill and ability and desire of creation or creativity on a amazing canvas that is life. But also another part may be equal to say about adventuring, which is to say that spirit is experiencing itself in life or in its own creation. So these are some of my ideas, I guess, or intuitions or things I've come to like. But yes, to reflect Lydia as well, I think we are here veiled and forgetful, and it is a great pleasure also to remember, rediscover.
Totally, Remo. I'm like so excited about this share, and that phrase that you use, like, this doesn't feel like home. And I think, in my humble understanding of the Rainbow Warrior prophecy, why would this feel like home? What would it be like if all souls were enabled in their remembrance instead of an immediate programming from reality? What would it be like to marvel at children from the fact that they have just come from the Creator and that they have so much to teach us about what we don't know and remember? And, I think that imprinting of the beautiful, peaceful rebellion that the way things are does not feel like home, fill in all personal reasons why each one of us might feel that way, and the qualms that we have with the systems that be, and how we think that they can be better and more just and harmonious, is also the beautiful devotion of our humanness, our powerful I structure, egos, humanity, to serve that knowing, and that knowing that things can be better. And I think that that is the beautiful ascension and evolution journey of humanity at this time is to, within and throughout, build that home within and throughout in everyone's own, as you described it, like little niche, and to trust that and to trust that service and to serve that service, and that truth. It's yeah, it's so beautiful. And I truly think it's this, what a cosmic joke that humanity should have to choose their next step of evolution. They don't get to just have it flow, but one has to make the conscious choice day in and day out, over and over, to ascend, to evolve, to grow roots deep into the earth and deep into hell in order to grow to the highest heights of what it means to remember the bliss state, the empty silence, the womb of creation that we came from.
Yeah, that's the, beautiful, what would you say? Yeah, cosmic joke is a good one. We are alchemists. We can first of all, we can make shit into gold. That doesn't mean I will always want to be doing that. But secondly, also we are pretty good at making gold into shit. So that's the cosmic joke, I guess of humanity, and in my, let's say, more challenging and difficult parts of my more challenging and difficult trips, these are also the realities I've come to face and have to accept, that maybe we are, sometimes the shit bucket of God or gods, maybe we are sometimes the platform or the playground of gods, as humanity, as not just as life. And or maybe this is just a phase. I'd like to hope.
And how can we love that, though? To me, that's Tantra. How can I love and accept and embrace that in my greatest shittiness and in my greatest selfishness, that I am still made in the image of God, and that this is still a part of that, journey as, Brahman Atman, as that separation from the one into the many, and as my journey from the many back into the one. And how can I hold that universal, eternal perspective as I do it all? And what, I think that may be a beautiful idea, but what is the lived reality of when I actually put that into practice? Like, that's my greatest invitation, is what does that really feel like for someone who has this interest in and feels this resonance with a philosophy, a religion, a way of life as the different streams of Tantra. Vyushti, I'd be really curious what you feel about all this.
Yeah, so many thoughts, but yeah, it was really in a mode of receiving and contemplating. But I agree with what you're talking about in terms of, through the shittiness, because I remember this archetype came to me, I think maybe a couple of years ago, or last year or something, irrelevant. But this real beauty of the shit. Like, I know that might sound crass, that might sound weird, but because when you look at it, it transforms into like a fertilizer. It uses manure to nourish the garden so that the trees can grow, so that the plants can bloom. And I think that so often we're so quick to reject the shittiness, or we're so quick to judge ourselves for being not the best, like, oh, we knew better, oh, we shouldn't have done this, like there's so many things that where we become so self-critical, and that also has a purpose, but but ultimately there is so much richness in that, and if we can sit with that, if we can sit with the discomfort of not being perfect, because there's this idea like, sure, we are made in the image of God, but then we have this idea that God is perfect, but when we're talking about
Mm.
Tantra, there's this specific type of Tantra called Trika Tantra, which is the one that I'm familiar with. Um, and a lot of other Vedic thought, it's like, how do I explain it? Like, uh, the ultimate consciousness is what we're striving towards. But what Trika Tantra asks is, how does that consciousness liberate itself? Because that consciousness is also going through a journey, So there's this constant evolution and this constant growth, and there isn't this ultimate point, but even that ultimate point is growing and learning and doing all of that. Um, so yeah, like I forgot my train of thought. But yeah, that's what I feel has such value. And if we can hold compassion and kindness for ourselves as we go through that, I think I think that also has a ripple effect, because that's how we start treating other people. That's how other people start treating each other. And then that's when we see this shift in the relational space as well. Because I think with spirituality, there's a lot of personal spirituality, there's connection to something higher, but then there's also connection to each other. And that relational space is such a mirror of the a relationship we have with ourselves and whatever higher force that we believe in. So I don't know if I think I went on a complete tangent, but
No, 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 no. I
yeah.
like I like that you kind of criticized or questioned the idea of an ideal God or ideal consciousness. I also I love to come to these questions realizing that we can completely blow the box open, even if that box is like, thousands of years old religion
Mhm.
or like a deep philosophy. Like, who's to say that, like, yeah, of course in our terms God would be ideal, but try to look from behind that frame of reference as well. Maybe God isn't singular, maybe God isn't ideal, maybe God is also going through a temper tantrum right now. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think Vyushti, what you touched on in the relational space as well is where I can also speak to, a dimension of the interest in Tantra from, the Western perspective, from the perspective also of a person who is white. And I think that that is always an important conversation that um, I want to honor when I talk about this, because it's in humble curiosity I have had the privilege to learn different streams of Tantra and NeoTantra, and I think it's important to also have that conversation because there's a context, in the West, Tantra equals sex, and that just couldn't be farther from the reality of the streams and the texts, and sex is a part of some like little threads. And at the core, I think it's important to name that from my understanding as a whole, Tantra is a path of liberation, and it's described as like the quickest path to enlightenment. If you want to be enlightened in one lifetime, like this is it. And that was also a deep resonance of mine, because when I was 12 and I found Buddhism and I learned about enlightenment, I was like, that is what I'm here for. Sign me up. And there was the same resonance in Tantra. And so, right, like what could be harder and more enlightening to love your shit, to see the divinity in your shit, to see the divine play of an ever evolving source or consciousness that also is the trickster and the devil and all of these things included. Um, so I think, and from my training, one of the most beautiful intersections is in the relational space, as you spoke to, Vyushti. And in terms of, right, like perceptions of Tantra and sex, it's really beautiful as a sort of neo, as in new and innovated and involved. And Vyushti and I have had this conversation about yoga in the West, yoga in America and Europe. Should it be called neo yoga? And when I went through my yoga training, I loved how my teacher described it as telephone. It's like a game of telephone. By the time it reaches me, it's a whole different thing from where it started. Maybe I have some pieces of it. But I think what I've loved about this living stream of wisdom and way of being and practices is the deeply feminine nature of the streams that I have learned in, and the way through the body in practice and in healing and liberation, and again what it looks like to live it in my understanding and in my life and in my application, and what it looks like to bring that into the relational space and in the space of honoring the sacredness of partnership and of union. And if that's a desire of someone, I remember the first time I learned about sacred sexuality, I was like, this is a yes from me. Like, this is the sex and the sexuality that I came here for, that is so true to me. And to go through the process as a woman, as someone who's been sexually abused and assaulted, to reclaim that and to move through that process to get to what sex is in this culture in the West, and like what my sexuality is and what spiritual sexuality is. And then to get to look back on the mysteries of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, Jesus, and these likely real people that had a ministry of love and likely sacred sexuality. The more texts that we get, the more translations that we play with. What's the Greek translation of this word? Oh, it's consort. Oh, in Tantra, a consort is a sacred sexual partner. And so what does it look like to humbly get to turn to other streams of wisdom to understand, for me, where I come from, what my people come from, and what has been erased and removed from that consciousness, and then to reclaim that and to live and move towards a sacred sexual union that is an external embodiment of what I desire for this world, and my highest truth of, in romantic relationship, it is to live that relationship and dedicate that to both of our ascension and becoming and evolving, as well as that great spiritual gift of living with another and a beloved and God in and through one another. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh my God, no, I loved that so much, because you touched on so many things that really, really resonate with me. But it's true, because I never told you, I read the Magdalene manuscript, and I can't tell you, I can't tell you
Me too.
the way. I love this. I love this. No, but the way that it spoke to like my bones, I don't know how else to put it. And I think you touched upon that so deeply, and you're talking about Tantra, you're talking about, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, you're talking about all of these, and we were talking about the East and West and Tantra and all of that, but there's so much overlap, because even in the Magdalene manuscript, when you read the alchemies of ancient Egypt at that point of Isis. And like you look at Kundalini, you look at Tantra, you look at all of these things, it's all just just same truth, different angle. And I think that as we get to like the essence, when we get to truth, right? And like truth is such a enigmatic topic. But anyway, when we get to that essence and when we can come down to it and feel what you're talking about, right? With sacred sexuality, with sacred union with self, with all of that, I think that's what a lot about incarnation is about. And I think what you were talking about, the soul and the forgetting, I think that's what we have forgotten. And we sort of, Remo, you were talking about it earlier about the hero's journey and like sort of walling ourselves, like Gilgameshing ourselves, and like just being so that we can be the hero. And it's just how do we be truly human? And when we say truly human, it means truly divine. The way you said that Jesus and Mary were probably real people. So it's like, how do we come back to that truth and how do we embody that? And that's a really exciting journey. So thank you for bringing all of that up.
Can
I
I
think
just
this
chime in here, Remo, real quick?
go
Because I think
go.
this is really important. Um, One, and with no offense do I mean it, but I mean to share this in the sense that this is what I love about being alive at that time. And like, how beautiful. Who says that about the times we live in? What I love about being alive at this time, right? I was raised, and I believe this is part of my soul's journey, my soul's choosing. I was raised Roman Catholic. I sat in that church as a little kid thinking everyone was a robot and wondering, like, and feeling so weird about the whole thing. And I only say that because what's so beautiful of this time in my relationship to that story, um, as a story of two people that had different spiritual trainings and truths than what has been in the canonical story of the Roman Empire, who had another agenda besides spiritual truth, is that these were two people, they were teachers and they embodied their teaching, and they weren't the only ones. And what's so beautiful is that that's what's happening right now. There are so many teachers all around the world embodying their truths, their journeys, their lineages, and offering that as a reflection to others of, hey, there's another way. And if you resonate with this, this might be your way too. And in the path to finding your personal way that's different from my way. Um, and it just feels so important to name. Spoiler alert, this is in the novel. I just, and we do it. I do it. Hero worship. We do it all the time. I cannot wrap my head and I cannot express how like viscerally disgusting it is that we worship another human, or that I was taught to worship another human being as being anything above myself, different from myself, as having anything beyond what I also have. And I think that that's the greatest change I see happening when I look back at stories I've inherited, my lineages, and I look to today, and I look to exactly like you said, Vyushti, the intersection of the reality that, and I think it's so beautiful. Why are we having conversations about spiritual truth when we can't even agree on a truth of reality of an experience in common day society? Again, like what a beautiful cosmic joke. Figure it out, humans. Like what is reality? And like the invitations to start asking those questions and asking them from a place of healing and curiosity and wholeness, that empowers. And so, yeah, it's beautiful the way that we can, recover and reintegrate these truths, and that different cultures offer us opportunities to engage with archetypes, energies, that allow us that liberation and that expansion and that resonance in our bones and that reclamation. You know, Remo, we got to this. It was only a matter of time until we got to this here of the divine feminine. What are the flavors of the whole half? Like, to me, soul is feminine. The journey that we go on, that midwifing, I cannot control the process of birth. What does it mean to find and taste and embody all of the flavors of who we are, of that feminine, as so radically different than what we have been taught and boxed into and conditioned into?
Let me try to tie this up. So much inspiration. First of all, yeah, I read the Magdalene manuscript also, like when I was like 15 or something, and it completely blew me away and captured me. And coming back to archetypes, we have talked about the hero, which is the masculine archetype, and adventure, and then about surrendering, and the midwife, the feminine archetype, which is kind of, you know, surrendering, yeah, to the process, to life, and this dance, you know, as well as in dance you have the one who leads and the one who follows, and then you can, you know, swap those. And I would say that, like, for me, like the one of the biggest distillations for me, like, or extractions, like, from all of this, is that I think we have only one currency in life. You can describe it with a coin. One side of the coin is bravery, which is it's exactly the masculine archetype. You know, whether you answer to the call of adventure, and whether you are brave enough to follow these intuitions, and in the final analysis, your heart, your soul. The other side of that coin is trust. I think these two, and that is exactly corresponds to the midwife archetype, you know, to the feminine archetype, and I think these are the things, the only things you can truly have in life or not have, that you can truly regret or not regret of having. But now, like, going through all these archetypes, and also the question of creativity and the creator, I see that maybe, and these are, I would say, that the biggest, like, inspiration or interest of me are the archetype of, or the archetypes of a wizard or a magician, and the archetype of a storyteller. And these are very tied. I would say they are the same thing at different levels. So the work can tie this together is like being a wizard, being an artist, being a creator, is precisely coming to, you know, connect these polarities, the feminine and masculine quality, the bravery and the trust, the you know, adventure, the hero, and the birthing, or you know, channeling something through you into creation. That is wizardry, and in connecting these you know, polarities, this is where magic happened. And I think, or this is the magic. And I think what we are doing here, like these beautiful alchemists and liberators and also enchanters, I think the field of work for us, which is wide, is precisely knocking on the dead cold metal hearts of the machine men and the zombies, and bringing them back alive, evoking spirit back into them.
Re-enchanting. Re-enchanting the world.
Re-enchanting, re-enchanters. And also, I think that maybe last idea from me, and we are on top of the hour anyways, is that, you know, living here as a human, that the human soul, the human spirit embodied, I think this is creator squared in a sense. You know, we are creating, we are experiencing creation, and we are also conjoining them together because we are also being the creation of us, of ourselves, being the creator. We are creating ourselves to create more and to experience more of creation, you know, more fully. So that's where my mind kind of explodes or implodes, I would say.
I think that we're also, right? I mean, Vyushti, I feel like we've talked about this, adding food for thought for the end of this conversation, is we are channels. We are channels of a capital C creation and creator that evolves in and through us. What does it mean to be in that receptive antenna, receiving of emotion that is beyond, and that, right, the beautiful polarity of human free will and choice, to say yes or no, to create from ego or soul, to create from a combination of both. And also to honor, right? Like the world has always been enchanted, and everything is enchanted, and everything is living, and everything has consciousness, and we know that scientifically. And what does it mean to take that moment in the beginning to pause and acknowledge that energy that is felt but not seen? What does it mean to re-enchant our world and our lives, and to work with that?
Yeah, this is, sorry, quick jump in. This is also where in the beginning I told you that one keyword for me last 2 days has been coping. This is where this coping comes in as well, because I think that's what we are enabling and facilitating, you know, from these, you know, machines and zombies and also just monkeys, you know, or just, you know, older generations. We are here to help us cope with the divinity of ourselves and with this massive, crazy, you know, interconnection that has, you know, become a thing, become a reality now.
I just want to pick up on one thing that you said. You said cope with the divinity of ourselves. And I think that is such a profound statement that you made because, you know, it's a conversation I've been having with multiple people at this point in time, but the coping with the divinity of the self is almost like there is this fear, there is this resistance, and it's like, how do we get comfortable with the divinity within ourselves? How do we get comfortable with the power within ourselves? And how,
And
you know,
responsibility.
yes, of course, absolutely, because otherwise, without responsibility, without integrity, it's all skewed, right? So, how do we feel comfortable with that? And how do we not push that down? How do we not look the other way? Because, you know, there's this idea of like the divine light being blinding, and we
Mm,
have that
mm.
all within ourselves. So, how do we get comfortable with that light? So, I found that statement that you made very, very profound.
Yeah, and how to be carriers of that light, that blinding light, being blinded, and how long can you carry such light? Maybe, you know, in my trips, maybe the ones who've lost their ways have been carrying that light for too long. Maybe they need rest.
It's the dance, baby. The dance between darkness and the dance between light and the dance between all of it, and learning how to play with it. And I so, yeah, I so honor the reality, the steps, the pieces, you know, as we've already talked about here, of this divine light. Anthropos means fully human and fully divine. And I think that's a beautiful reality web flow to live. and touches on the embodied journey of what it means. And what would it mean, right? Like when you say coping with divinity, I'm like, no, embracing it. And it's just that piece of like, what are the truly integrated bottom up and top down pieces to live in that beautiful dance. It's the swirling yin yang. It's we have these symbols for a reason, and it's I think this has been an important piece and reminder for me, because I think one of the things that I struggle with so much in the spiritual space is what does it look like to be in integrity? What does it look like to be an embodiment? What does it look like to be grounded, right? Like we can only go so high as we have roots deep. And I think the more I feel protective around that, and I'm glad we had this conversation, because the more and more mainstream spirituality becomes, we talk about ideas of the divinity within ourselves. Remo, like you powerfully chimed in about that responsibility, the integrity, Vyushti, that you named. Like I can't choose to just be a baby God. I can't choose these things in my head. I have to know them in my body, in my being, in my bones. I have to have experience of them. I can't just read about them. And I have to do the healing. I have to go into hell. These are also all the great myths. Like if I don't do it, I am not integrated. And if I am not integrated, I can't help anyone. So put your oxygen mask on first, ladies and gentlemen, and then your neighbors.
A woman. A woman.
A yoni, as my partner and I say.
Yeah, and grounded in what? Grounded in love.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my, most intense trips, I would say, psychedelic trips, the moment I remember is the exact moment that I, with all my might and energy, will wish to forget. Yeah, and the only moments when that is not the case have been when I have been grounded in love. Yeah, when I come to that position or to that place, yeah, position is a good word too, being embodied and all. When I come to that position in love, and that goes back to sacred sexuality, to Tantra, to everything, I think, to creation, that's when let's say it becomes bearable.
It becomes lived. And I think that's the beauty of the time we live in, is on a decentralized, increasingly, I argue and I work towards like accessible level, like you say love, and I think about this tantric practice that I have, NeoTantric practice, that gives me the embodied experience of my own like depth of my heart in my body, in my felt sense, the pain that covers it, and to breathe and feel love from the polarities of the divine feminine, of the divine masculine, to heal each of those, and then to experience the love of the universe in and through my body in an altered state of consciousness, but also through my own consciousness and body without anything else as a part of it. Like that's the world we live in, and that's what excites and lights me up so much, is that for the first time in our entire humanity, these things are accessible to arguably everyone.
Yeah, this is precisely the Jesus myth, you could say the founding story of our civilization, coming to voluntarily accept the pain, the suffering, not just like our situation, but also the past, the weight of the past, the accumulated trauma in our genes, as well as, in the present moment, the pain and suffering of others, and the capacity to which we can do that. The more I think we can also step into our divinity, you know, because we can finally, you know, like we have to finish soon, but like my let's say 20s are like, I'm just turning 30, so I don't want to be an old guy. but the beginning of my 20s,
Embrace your wisdom.
just massive partying, massive like exploration and disintegration, intentional disintegration, you know, the unlearning that Alan Watts talks about. That one, so okay, two big questions I had after a while of that was, one was that what is better than drugs? You know, what else is there to live for, basically? You know, what could be better than that? And not everyone finds the answer to that, sadly. And the second question, you know, we all want to be kind of, at least my immediate surroundings then was very like hippie-ish spirituality, and everyone wants to have a community, everyone wants to come together to connect, you know, be connected on a deeper, like in terms of quality and quantity. And so my question was like, yeah, we use these drugs, we come to these moments and we do it, you know, why, like the question was like, why aren't we in that state all the time, and why are we using drugs as intermediaries? Because also through my spiritual practice, I've learned and experienced that it's not necessary. It's totally unnecessary. In fact, it's usually like dampening the experience. You know, for example, you know, contrasting MDMA with falling in love or some true bliss states in spiritual practice. Why are we using drugs? So one answer, let's say some answers I got just through my own experience, was that, you know, drugs give you the promise of forgetting. You know, you can take the drug, you can get the experience, and you can forget about it. You know, you can take MDMA with your friends or your enemies. You can feel super spiritual, you can feel super loved, and the next day you don't have to give a shit about them. You know, you don't have to do the hard work of tending to them, of caring about them, of calling them maybe once a week, once a month at least. It's like, and that, I guess, describes the kind of societal, you know, commodification that the fast food industry applied to every endeavor and part of our experience very well. So yeah, just grounding all this back, you know, into integrity and love and embodiment, is that just to echo your points, Vyushti and Lydia, that, you know, unless we also do the work, and I'd very much like to maybe in the next episode with you explore a few models, a few theories that I've discovered that kind of beautifully tie these things together. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Remo and Vyushti, for sharing, and Remo especially for your final share. I think it's, you know, that topic is important to my heart and my journey, and just a message I feel so necessary to have as psychedelics have a renaissance. It's nothing against them, but I am such a proponent that we can have, and I also feel you so deeply. The mystical states in and through my own body are something that I cherish and I'm so grateful for, and are my most prized possessions. And yeah, I want that for everyone that wants that feeling. And yeah, thank you for your share with that insight and beautiful reflection on ego consciousness and the reality of yeah, that interpersonal love and share.
Yeah, I found it really, really resonant as well. And I also think that we were talking about love, being grounded in love and things like that. And I think what you were touching on with hippie culture spirituality or drug spirituality. You know, when you look at these dimensions, I think it brings up topics of belonging and escape, right? Like it's this hunger for belonging, but this escape from either self or responsibility. And so I think that coming back to what you were saying, being grounded in love can be a very flowery idea, but to actually do it in practice is a lot of work. And that work can be so rewarding if we're willing to sit with it. So I really found it a lovely point to probably, I'm guessing, bring this episode to an end because I don't know how much over we've gone.
Yeah.
But what a what a rich conversation.
I just want to add something. I can't help it. Vyushti, what you said about the love and the escapism, I think one of the greatest things we can collectively learn is that it is so loving to sit in our pain and with our pain and to tend our pain and to tend our trauma and to not in no way I'm saying to stay stuck in it, but to not escape, to take that responsibility, that loving high parent, or I mean high as in ascended, so to speak, evolved, the mature feminine, the mature
Mature.
masculine, the mature embodied approach to that loving um showing up for ourselves, and to never forget that sitting with that discomfort is one of the most loving things we
Mm.
can do for ourselves in that moment, instead of escape, instead of go on social media, instead of fill in the blank with, you know, each of our personal uh preferred
Coping
methods of
mechanisms.
escape.
Yeah, that's like maybe a final thing I would say about the soul as well, like embodied soul in that sense is we are here to mature our understanding and capability to love or of love.
I'm so biting my tongue to not add that. I'm like, to love each other, to love the plants, to love the water, to love the air, to love the earth. Yeah, there's a whole nother podcast episode in there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the listeners as well. I hope you had a ride, roller coaster maybe. I sure did. I sure did. I guess until the next time.